Hey guys, I'm Quentin Torbert. Thank you so much for coming back to my YouTube channel. I have a special guest, Mr. Bruce Ayers.
Hello.
What's up,
How
Bruce? How
you
you
doing,
doing?
everybody? Good, good, good.
Pretty good. So, if for
Thank
the
you for having me on.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Do you mind introducing yourself to our viewers?
Sure thing. I can introduce myself. So I am Bruce Ayers. Me and Quentin know each other. We go to the same church, brothers in Christ, known each other for quite some time, about 2 years now, right? 2 years, two and a half.
Oh, yeah, somewhere around. Time flies by, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Time
Don't even get me
flies by.
started on that. In like a month and a day, I'm going to be 26.
Wow, you're an old
Um,
man.
Yeah, I'm lamenting that. I'm like, I officially I feel like once I hit that point, I can't call myself a kid no
Yeah,
more. It's like
you seem like a young
it's
face. You
official.
look younger, but you're definitely very, very mature. You're very well beyond your years.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just
That's
gonna
a
shave my
good
face
thing.
off as soon as it happens and still tell people I'm 22. So
Yeah, I see. So we're doing quarantine, as most of you know who watch my other videos. So that's why we're doing this via Zoom. But yeah, I
Mhm.
shaved during quarantine as well, and I feel like I look 10 years younger. Like I don't even recognize. I'm looking at this guy in the reflection. I don't know who that guy is. Like who is that guy? Who is he?
It's not you.
Me. That's not me. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. We're continuing part 2, relationship goals. This is with Pastor Mike Todd. Essentially, he's doing a whole series called Relationship Goals Reloaded. And he's essentially laying the foundation of how to first get the principles correct to get a good relationship, and how those relationships can spill over into other areas of life, and how you can have a great life. So far for the part 2, rip up your list. What were your opening thoughts for that? What were your first initial thoughts on those?
um, my initial thoughts on just again repeating the question so I better understand it. Is my initial thoughts on just all the videos you've done previously?
No, so just specifically rip up your list.
Rip up your list. Oh, I thought it. First off, my wife is a huge fan of Transformation Church and
Yeah.
Pastor Mike Todd. I am also a big fan. I don't listen to him realistically as much as she does. I think I am going to add him to my podcast rotation because I do need. I don't know why I don't already have them in there because I do listen to a Christian audio, listen to a sermon a day. So today I listened to like 3 though because for this, but
That's good. That's good.
typically, yeah.
One a day. That's good. That's a good challenge for me. I need to start that too.
No, man, it's on I've been doing it for about consistently without missing a beat, honestly, for about 6 months now. Like there'll be days where I'll like go a day or two without it, but consistently I'll go like most of the time, 25 days out of the month listening to at least one a day. And it's done wonders for my faith and growth. And I just add on top of that, I can't just listen to audios and grow my faith that way. I also now, again, I told you about the things I've been doing to help me grow consistently.
Yeah.
But again, it's not about that. Staying on topic with the question more so. So you asked me exactly what did I think of it. I thought Rip Up Your List was great. I thought it was absolutely awesome. And the way he talked about it. And my initial impressions actually goes back to another quote I heard. This is from one of the people who I do listen to podcasts about, and what really defined me, not even just in terms of how I feel relationships, but really defined me as a person while I was in college. But he did a series on love, God, and relationships. His pastor, Ben Stewart. And a quote that stuck with me was, he said, the right person at the wrong time is the wrong person.
Oh,
And
one more time. You gotta say that
the
again.
right person at the wrong time is the wrong person. And that is so profound for me. So I'm gonna connect that a little bit to my story and why I love Pastor Michael Todd's Rip Up Your List about your plans. So anyone who actually knows the story about me and my wife actually would know that my wife and I, we went to high school together. We knew each other in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And we were really good friends, but we did not date. And we did not date. And she does all the time. I just say it's because she didn't like me. I say that as a joke because I tell people, but the honest to God truth, and now it's going to be on video recording so I can never take it back anymore, is that we were the right people for one another, but we were not the right time. Mm-hmm. And as Michael Todd puts it, it's because we were not at the right place. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really profound in the way he put that and expanded upon that, because again, ripping up your list important. I knew what I wanted. I knew that I wanted her, but there were so many things about the place that I was in and where I needed to be that wasn't right. I was focused on, when you go to his first thing, I was focused on a person and I wasn't focused on my purpose. So
that's so good. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's exactly what he talks about there. So that's why I loved it, because a lot of these things that when we talk about relationships, we always focus on this is what you got to do as a person, this way you do that. But if you actually listen to his sermons, when he talks about relationships and relationship goals, very little of it actually has to do with you interacting with that person. And it all has to do with God's divine purpose for your life, and how if you walk in that and live in that, the rest is going to come. And that's what I really like about the whole series altogether, but specifically that. Now, that's not to say there aren't still important things that you need to understand about relationships. He does talk on those. Yeah. But I think that is the core root of it that needs to be hit on, that we don't talk about enough, because we'll talk about the relationship stuff enough, but we won't talk about the purpose and what happens before you get to the person enough.
That's so good. And that's one of his opening points. He says, God is more committed to your destiny rather than your desires. So you may desire for your spouse or your mate to have a specific look or to something superficial on the outside. Well, God, he knows what you need, and that's what he'll give you what you need. And so I love how Pastor Mike Todd brought that service into them.
Right. You know,
also, I love this section because it was dealing with relationships, but it was more like dealing with the heart for this one. Sometimes you can be so concentrated on these superficial things on these lists that we create without God that you kind of miss the whole thing. Like you just said, it could be the right person at the wrong time. And so that's good. So for you and Natalie, just so our viewers know, Bruce is married. And so one of the reasons why I love having you on is because every time Pastor Mike Todd releases a new series in this, he releases a new sermon, I like to get people's feedback. So I have had two other people, and both of those people were single. But you are married, so I'm really excited to get your married perspective on relationship goals and kind of how that translates to you in your marriage and kind of the overall picture. So I love that. So back to you, like I know you started off how you and Natalie met, but do you mind continuing that story?
Right. So again, we met in high school. I had a crush on her the first moment I met her, and we actually had to talk about it last night, one of our late night pillow talks. And we were just talking about asking each other back and forth questions, because we will ask each other first date questions as if after having been together for 5 years, going on 6 years. And we'll still ask each other first date questions. And I think that's really important that you do, because people always knowing, but there'll be things that you miss and it really gets to the heart. One of the things my wife asked me was one of the first things that attracted you to me. And honest to truth, God, I told her it was the fact that you love God. It was from the moment I first met her, we sat down okay, so the first time I saw her, the first thing I noticed was that she was black. And that's because we're in a classroom.
Being honest.
There's not a whole lot of black people. There wasn't a lot of melanin in that classroom. Unfortunately, she sat right next to me in homeroom. This was junior year. And I was like, yes, sit next to the other black kid. Great.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, that was the first thing. And that is one of the things that's very important for me. That's because, again, about me finding my purpose, but more so important for me is about finding her. It was that God, because of the fact that the first thing we talked about was about God. I mentioned the fact that I was a believer. She mentioned the fact she was a believer, and she was always we were known for the school for being really committed believers. That's what we were known for. Now we were also still known for being backsliding high school kids, but we were known for those church kids. That's what we were known for. That's what we identified as. So it was very that was really what our initial connection was, and always found on that. So we were friends in high school. When we separated apart for about 1.5 years, and we went to college, we went and we hung out. And we were always really good friends. She had a really good relationship with my mom. She ended up meeting up with my mom when we came back to Tampa. And she ended up saying, I want to hang out with Bruce. I said, let's go to the movies. We went out to a movie. And then a couple of days later, it was just us hanging out in that setting. For her, it wasn't for her to see a change in me. She was like, I'm feeling this dude. And then she actually saw a post of a friend of mine, another Christian friend of mine, where she was doing the things like, oh, do I look good with this person? Just doing side-by-side face pictures, like how does me and this person tag? Yeah. This person, I said, here, use a picture of me. So whatever. And she saw that. She was like, so are you with that person? And then she just told me. I was like, no, Natalie, I'm not. What's up? Because I'm at the point where it's like, bruh, I've been curved by this girl for 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm done. It's not happening. It's over. She told me, yeah, I'm kind of feeling you. So it's like, oh,
Hey,
well. So that was how that happened. And we dated. But again, it was, had we dated before that point, when we were in that place, I had a lot of growing to do. I got delivered from during that season when I was in my first year of college. That's why I listened to those podcasts that I mentioned earlier by Ben Stewart that taught me about relationships. Mm-hmm. And it was during that season that taught me about relationships that actually prepared me for her and gave me my purpose and place and understanding. Wow. So had I not done that before getting into my relationship with her, it would have been destructive. I would have not known how to handle what God had given me. It's a rapper Bizzle, the way he puts it, is like, you always got God for things, but that's like, again, you don't understand, God, why can't I have this? But you understand, you're the child, he's the parent. The same reason why you don't give your child a bunch of candy, or because you know the cavities, you know, tummy aches, you know the end result of that they can't see, is the same reason God won't give you the partner that you think you want, because you're not ready to handle it. Why he won't maybe give you the car, the business, those things, because it's like, look, you ain't ready for that. And like, we use the phrase God equips the called, but like, if you ain't equipping yourself, if you're not going into the armory, like, you know, man, like, he'll equip you, but he ain't just gonna give you it if you ain't in there trying to get ready for battle. So
I love that's like the key point that I heard from your story. Is like, you made sure you were getting your mind right. You were seeking God. Like, you just didn't jump into a relationship. You just didn't see a girl who's pretty, say, I want her, and then jump into that. Like, you were very strategic. I think like men need to hear that. Like, more men need to like be more conscious of kind of getting your mind right. Like, focus on sermons and focus on like the word of God before just jumping into any relationship with the girl.
Right. And I wasn't always like that, but I will close on that point with this, but we both were changing, and we both made a decision before we got together. We were both, I was trying to date one girl. She was talking to some boy, and they both fizzled out because of the fact that the person was not committed to God as we both were. That was when he said that the next person, we both made a decision, the next person I get with is going to be committed and faithful to Christ, and that's going to be the person I marry. That's what we decided. So the moment that we got together and that happened, we already knew from that point, this is the person I'm going to marry. Like it was like that. It was like, because we already knew the other person was faithful, committed to God, but they grown and matured into where they were going to be, because we weren't just going, hey, I just want a pretty person. We were seeking Christ first, and we were looking for someone who can strengthen that. And we'll go into that more later, because I know what Michael Todd goes into and talks about, it's going to come up again. So we're going to like definitely delve into that. And when he talks about your list, and he talks about what all happens even before the person. So,
For sure. I love that. And I think one of the areas that you have to keep pushing forward in life, I'm sure when you were dating other people and when she was dating other people, it may have felt like it was a pit. And that's what Michael Todd kind of gives a revelation in his sermon, where sometimes you can feel like you're in the pit. Before you get to the palace, sometimes you have to go through the pit.
Right.
So sometimes God is still operating. And let me pull up my notes. From Genesis 40, Joseph was still serving in the season, even though he was in prison. So for people at home who don't know, Joseph was sold out from his brothers, and they literally sent him to prison. And so even in that season, he still chose to serve. He still chose to help people around him, and he was still a blessing to people. I know for me, I would be so salty.
So when you're in those pits and you feel like nothing's happening, remember, whatever you're going through, God is using it so that the greatest good can be done in your life. You don't have to understand how that greatest good. And Joseph didn't know that he was going to be used to literally help save an entire nation through a famine. David knew he was going to be king, but he didn't know he had to go through that to be king, to unite really all of Israel, conquer all the Philistines, and become the leader that he needed to be. He didn't know that's what the purpose was for that. But whatever you're going through, understand it is done, because the story always ends. Whether Joseph, Moses, when he had ran away after he killed one of the Egyptians, David, always in the end is done for the greatest good. So when you think about those pits, you just go, order my steps, because you ought to understand that whatever you're going through, whatever evil it may be, how trials, what may seem like the enemy is even trying to do to attack you, God is going to use it so the greatest good can be done.
God's good all the time. That's real good.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like I want to take notes while you're talking. Like, you guys need to be taking notes during this. This is so good. Yeah. I didn't even think of that point, but that makes a really good point. Another good thing about being in the pit season is like, God is eventually going to get you out of that. And so we see that
Right.
with Joseph. So from Pastor Todd's sermon, Joseph, he stayed in the pit, but he still continued to serve. So he still continued to serve with the baker and the cup drinker. And part of the season is being in that pit season is really, really tough. But again, just keeping in mind that God will never leave you nor forsake you. Like he has something bigger and better. That sounds so cheesy and cliche because we hear that all the time.
Right.
It really is true. Like we
hear it all the time because it's true. We hear it all the time, and we get desensitized to it because we hear it all the time.
Yeah. And that's kind of desensitized to it, but it's so true. Like it's so real, so powerful.
The saying is true. The more you say something, the more meaning it loses. If you aren't the one saying it to yourself. Because I think maybe part of the issue is with that, while we'll say like it sounds cliche, is because we hear other people say it, but we don't believe it ourselves and we don't say it to ourselves. Yeah. When you start saying to yourself daily, those things that God is good all the time, whatever he's using for my greatest good. When you say that and you start to believe that, you start to walk in that. Because that's what I started doing every morning, is saying those things. And once I did that, I think that's what prepared me for this season. Because it's like, I really do believe, yeah, this is going to be used for my greatest good. What am I worried for? Because I really do. I would not just say it anymore. I believe it. It's not just a catchy phrase. So we have to learn how to walk in those things.
I love that. I love that. Man.
Yeah.
One of the other big points I really love that he brought up is that your name is in rooms you've never been in yet. And so back to the story of Joseph. Joseph was in the pit, and he had already had the encounter with the baker and the cup drinker. And eventually those two guys get released. And I believe it was the baker, if I'm not mistaken, goes back up to the palace. And the palace ends up, for some reason, they needed a dream interpreter. They need somebody to interpret dreams.
They needed a dream interpreter because the Pharaoh was the one who was like, I keep having this dream. It was the dream about the 7 calves and the seven dying ones. Yeah. And that's when the wine drinker was like, I remember someone who did that.
Like, I think I know a man who could do that. And I just love that because Joseph is sitting there in jail, he's in prison in shackles, and he didn't even know they were discussing him. And that's why I love that point where even in our everyday lives, like we may not know what's around the corner. We may not even know what's going to happen tomorrow, but there's somebody like speaking positive things of us. There's somebody who's speaking our names to rooms that we haven't even been in yet.
Right. Yeah.
And I love that.
So you pretty much hit on that point. That's pretty much just what it is. I like it too. I do want to be the negative ninny. Bring up a counterpoint to that about the rooms, because it's not always a good thing, because remember, Job's name was brought up in conversation. Like with Joseph, it was like, I know a guy. Job gets out of prison. Job having a great life. Devil comes in. Well, what about your servant Job? Let me get my hands on him. And it's like Job minding his own business, and then he gets affected. So like, again, your name is always being brought up in conversation. But I think it's also important to know, even though the end result, like what Joseph got out of that was the second highest authority in Egypt and was out of jail. What Job got out of that is that he lost everything. But what was the end result and reason for both of that? It was all let me phrase that. What was the reason the names were brought up in the first place? Both those names were brought up because they were loyal and good servants.
After Joseph is in prison, he gets called up to the Pharaoh's palace to interpret the dreams. And I love Pharaoh's response when he meets Joseph. He says something to the effect of, he knew that Joseph was a godly man. Like he knew that from him interpreting the dreams. Joseph knew that God could interpret those dreams. And Pharaoh says something, I'm trying to find it in my notes. Genesis 41:37, Pharaoh saw that Joseph was filled with God. And so I love that. Like in our lives, when people interact with us and people come in contact with us, they should be able to say the same thing about Quentin and Bruce. Like, oh, like those guys love God. Those guys are filled with God. And so I think that really comes into, it's really similar to the point you made previously about having your name attached to something good. And like, speak to like your character and like the fruits of your labor. For you, why do you think that's important? Why do you think it's good for the story? Why did Pharaoh saw that Joseph was filled with God? And then even in our lives, why do you think that's a good thing for people to see God in our lives?
Because if they see God in their lives, that's how they come to know God. And again, it just goes back to the name attached thing. If you carry yourself, walking yourself with that, you will be known as a person. Like even like, again, going back to me and my wife now, even when we were backsliding Christians, the name that was attached to us was, those are the church kids. Those are the believers. They know, they believe, They're devout about it. They actually practice what they walk. They're not perfect. They're still a kid, and they're still fallible. I don't want to say they're kids because I feel like that's a justification for the things that did. But I think that that's very important, that it is understood that, yeah, it all goes back to the name. And I think it's also important to know, I don't think enough people really get this, because we're kind of harsh on the world. We give the word a lot of judgment. But one thing that I found when I was reading reading the Bible, all just at least the Old Testament, is the people who had their pagan gods and worshiped them, they still recognized God. They still were like, yo, their God, have mercy on us. And they were like, when they recognized when people other gods, like, don't mess with their God, they understood that. And I think that speaks to that with Pharaoh here, that the world will look at, like, even the world should still look at us, and they may not want to vibe with us, but they should still look at us and go, no, I respect those people. Like, I respect those people, and I respect their God. And as of right now, they don't really do that. And now I think that is something that should be said about the church, and a conversation that needs to be had. Yeah. But I think if you read the Bible, when they thought about our God and they looked at us, there was a reverence to that, even when they were like, yeah, we don't vibe with those people. We might attack and go to war with those people. There was a point even during war where they took an ark made for the tribes of Israel, and it was the Ark of God. And literally there was like terrible disease and things happening in the town while they had it. And they were like, their God is too powerful. Give it back to them. Give it back to them. And the ark they stole, they was like, you can have that back. We don't. You can have it back. All good. Y'all good. Like, I understand we at war with y'all, and we understand if we give this to y'all, y'all gonna be blessed. But we cursed if we have it. So like, we recognize your power of your God, do that. And I think that was Pharaoh even saying, hey, we may believe in some different gods, but we recognize the power of your God. We understand that because we see that proof in you. And right now, we need to be able to see that work. Even when we show ourselves to the world, people should still look at us and go that. I think you'll even find some people, that's why you'll find people who are secular, but when they find people they may want Christian partners, because it's like, I like their values. I like their values. They still vibe. They still mesh. They're still good, moral, ethical people. Some people might feel that way. And I think that is the name that should be attached to us when people think about our God, when they think about our Jesus, and they think about us. That should be what is attached.
I love that. That's a really good point. As long as you're attached to something with God, like you're going to win, you're going to be successful. So that's a really good point. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end, one of the final points that Pastor Mike Todd said about ripping up your list is that it's so important to rip your list. And one of the final reasons is that other people's survival is depending on you surrendering in this season. And so he used the narrative of Joseph, how Joseph helped lead his brothers through, the same men that chastised him and sent him to prison, and the same men that were responsible for him having this really tough life. He ends up blessing them essentially by feeding them during the famine. So I love the entire series, just the relationship goals. I'm excited to kind of get your thoughts on marriage. Like, how has the marriage life been treating you since? How long have you been married?
It will be oh man, don't put me on the spot like that. I won't remember. I will be my third year come this, because we got married in 2017. So this will be my third year.
Nice.
September 9th of this year. Yep.
What's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself from marriage? Because I know essentially this is like a multiple phase series. I think in all he said it's gonna be like 4 or 5 phases. So the end goal is to obviously end up in marriage. So for you, you've already kind of arrived at that end point, the end goal of that. The rest of us are trying to get to. Like, what have you learned the most about yourself from getting there for marriage?
The biggest thing that was exposed to me about my marriage, all right, I'm about to be really open right now. So the phrase, and you got to believe this phrase, marriage isn't meant to make you happy. Marriage is meant to make you holy. That's so true, because there are certain things, intimate things in my life that don't get exposed or brought up if I don't get married. One of those things that brought up was, I've always struggled and had an addiction to pornography. That was my biggest struggle. God blessing, I haven't had any issues with pornography for over a year now. I can't remember the last time I've looked at it, or even where I had a desire to look at it. So praise be to God, hallelujah, for that. and speaking to that. But what I learned in this season was where that came from, and how, even though I'm not desiring pornography, how that can manifest itself in other ways and in other relationships. And just understanding that, like, the biggest thing I learned about me is how much of a stronghold lust was in my life, and how it played and manifested itself in other areas in my life, and understanding where the roots of it came from, where that trauma came from. And I think, and I use my wife, not to give too much of her story, for her, she figured out, oh man, I am not that nice of a person. Like, I can be pretty angry. How wrath had a hold in life, and where that came from, and why that was there. And us literally finding out those things about us, and then merging that, and that, using that to make us better Christians. I think that's the most beautiful thing about it. It helps makes our testimony stronger because of that. And I think that's really what the most beautiful thing, the biggest thing that changed about me in marriage.
And I'm sure that brings you guys closer together as well.
Oh yeah, of course. So have you heard of the triangle? The biblical triangle of war. So I'm actually draw it up because I have the paper in front of me right now. So typically they're gonna be. It's not gonna be pretty. This is me and my. That looks ugly. So this is us, right? This is me. This is my wife. I'm gonna bring it up. So this is me, this is my wife. This is me in my hot top, and this is my wife with her hair.
Good hot top.
Right. So what we'll do is that we understand that, like, we try to get closer to one another. This is how far apart we are. The line separates our separation, and we will try to get closer to one another and get closer, right? Here's what the problem with that. When we do that, we don't get any closer to God at the top. We get closer to one another, we get closer to God. But here's what changes about that. How you can change that. So when you look at it now in its full clarity, again, you have me and her at the bottom. But when we get closer to God, notice we get closer to each other at the exact same time. So and again, that's exactly what Michael Todd said, what Biz, all of them are saying the same thing, is that we are focused on a person and not our purpose. But when you focus on your purpose, when you focus on getting closer to God, guess what? That other person, if they focus on getting closer to God too, y'all just gonna run into each other along the way. It's like, if just think about it this way. If I'm going to Hawaii and you're going to Hawaii, and we're going to Hawaii for a conference, and we're going to go to the conference, and we're going to go to that same panel together because that's what God told us to do. Don't you think if we're focused on our purposes and we go in that direction, we're going to run into each other? But instead, I'm chasing after you, just trying to find you wherever you are. Meanwhile, while you're chasing after God, therefore, I can't find you. But if I've been chasing after my purpose, I would have been in the right place at the right time.
That's good. That is so good.
You chase after your purpose, and if y'all both chasing after that purpose, y'all go run into each other. It's bound to happen. You will meet that person on the way because they're headed in the exact same place. That's the purpose of the triangle shows you. If I were to closing thoughts on just relationships as far as society goes, again, you're good. Reading Songs of Solomon breaks down the phases that relationships should go in before you guys enter those relationship guys. It goes from evaluation to dating to courting, dating, all that stuff. It goes into marriage. I think the most important thing though is the book I read. It says, "When sinners say I do," and it's understanding this, that what you believe about God will determine what you believe about marriage. That is the quote is said about that.
I love that. That's real
what
good.
You believe about God is what you will believe about marriage. Because if you believe God is holy and perfect and you're not, that means you believe you're a sinner. And guess what that means if you believe you're a sinner? That means you believe that your spouse is a sinner, which means that you believe that anything, if they're going to hurt you, they're going to be flawed, they're going to be perfect. So when you look at it through that, and what you believe about God, and you look at them through a child of God, you start to look at them with grace, and it changes the entire perspective in which you view your relationship with that person as not, this is the one for me, the one that God made for me, designed for me. It was like, no, this is the one that God made, yes, to do and fulfill a purpose in your life, but it's not the person that was meant to make you happy, because God is the person that was meant to feel that. Because if you're looking for a imperfect creature to make you happy, if you're looking for a sinner, like at the end of the day, they're a sinner. Your spouse is a sinner. Let's get away. They are a sinner. They are just as not righteous as you are. They are a sinner. You are a sinner. So if you're looking for a sinner to be the thing that, yes, I'm saved now, I'm good, you're going to be disappointed. Just sending, you're giving them a standard that they can't live up to, like which is unfair to them. So again, what you believe about God will determine what you believe about stuff in the relationship. And I think that gives you the focus. Now you will put your focus when saying that on God, and you're developing a relationship with Him. And that then, of course, like I said, like we've all been saying before, that will put you in the right place in the right time where you meet that person for that. Everything, again, always circles back to going to God. If you were meant to be married and you're designed for that, and that's the desire in you, it's going to come. Don't worry about it. Like it's gonna, but your marriage is meant to be, it's not just meant to make you happy. It's meant to make you holy, and it's meant to fulfill a purpose in your life. But you can't find that person until you're in the place you need to be so that y'all both can fulfill that purpose. Gotcha. And that's what's really important.
Look, you have encouraged my whole heart now. I'm ready. My spirit. I love it, man. I love it. Hey, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please feel free to comment below. What are the next videos you guys want me to post? What do you want to see? If you want to see Bruce back, definitely let me know. Thank you guys for your time. And again, thank you, Bruce, for taking time out of your day to do this. This was amazing.
No problem, man.
All right, see you guys next time.
Anytime.
Peace.
Bye.